If you had to choose between living a few extra years or living the years you already have with energy, clarity, and meaning, what would you choose? Most people believe that health is about optimization, about supplements, superfoods, strict routines, and endless rules. But what if most of that effort barely matters? What if the real secret to a long, healthy life is not obsession, but simplicity, not perfection, but wisdom? In Eat Your Ice Cream, physician and public health expert Ezekiel J. Emanuel cuts through decades of confusing wellness advice and delivers 6 simple, evidence-based rules that actually work. No miracle pills, no extreme routines, just common sense backed by science. This is not a book about living forever. It is a book about living well. The book opens with a familiar social situation. At a gathering, a woman raises a glass of wine and asks the author whether a glass of wine a day is really good for her health. Before he can answer, another person jumps in, explaining that he quit drinking after COVID and now feels healthier than ever. Both want validation. Ezekiel Emanuel uses this moment to illustrate a bigger problem. Modern wellness advice is confusing, contradictory, and overwhelming. Every week, a new study seems to reverse the conclusions of the previous one. One day coffee is good for you. The next day, it is dangerous. One expert promotes fasting. Another warns against it. As a physician who has spent decades working in public health and health policy, Emanuel has seen this confusion up close. He helped shape national healthcare policy and nutrition guidelines, yet even he is constantly asked to arbitrate wellness debates at dinner parties. His conclusion is blunt. Most people are asking the wrong questions. Instead of obsessing over tiny lifestyle tweaks that might add a few minutes to life, we should focus on a handful of behaviors that make life healthier, more functional, and more meaningful. He reminds us of a simple truth. We are all going to die. Time only moves in one direction. The goal is not to outlive everyone else, but to live fully while we are here. Emanuel criticizes the modern wellness industry for consuming enormous amounts of time, money, and mental energy while offering marginal benefits. He points to extreme longevity enthusiasts who swallow dozens of pills a day, follow rigid routines, and track every biological marker, often at the expense of joy, relationships, and purpose. Wellness, he argues, has become both too complicated and too shallow. Too complicated because it fixates on molecular biology and speculative interventions that do not translate into real-world benefits. Too shallow because it ignores social and psychological health, which matter far more than most diets or supplements. Drawing on evidence from epidemiology, psychology, and long-term population studies, Emanuel distills wellness down to 6 behaviors that provide the greatest return on effort. These behaviors are not new. Ancient civilizations understood them. They appear repeatedly in populations that live long, healthy lives, such as the so-called blue zones. Importantly, the author emphasizes that wellness should be integrated into life, not turned into a full-time job. Habits matter more than willpower. Perfection is unnecessary. Even doing things right most of the time is enough. The message is liberating. You do not need to be flawless to be healthy. You need to be consistent, sensible, and focused on what actually matters. Chapter 1. Don't be a schmuck. Avoiding self-destructive risks. The first rule of a healthy life is surprisingly simple. Do not sabotage yourself. Emanuel introduces this rule through a personal story from his teenage years. As a 16-year-old, desperate for independence, he bought an old Volvo with his savings. It looked great, drove smoothly, and seemed like a bargain. Only after bringing it home did he discover the fatal flaw. The car could not reverse. His father's reaction was immediate and unforgiving. He called them schmucks. The lesson stayed with Emanuel for life. It is easy to get distracted by appearances and excitement while ignoring basic functionality. The same mistake happens constantly in wellness. People chase trendy diets, supplements, and routines while ignoring behaviors that carry massive, obvious risks. Being a schmuck, in Emanuel's definition, does not mean avoiding all risk. Life always involves risk. The goal is to avoid activities that carry a high probability of serious, irreversible harm without meaningful benefit. The biggest schmuck move of all is smoking. Smoking remains one of the most destructive behaviors known to medicine. On average, smokers lose 10 years of life compared to non-smokers. Heavy smokers lose even more. Each cigarette shortens life by roughly 20 minutes. No supplement or exercise routine can compensate for that damage. The author emphasizes that quitting smoking works at any age. Even people who quit in middle age regain years of life expectancy. Quitting is difficult because nicotine addiction is both biological and psychological, but difficulty does not make it optional. Emanuel is empathetic towards smokers. He acknowledges that quitting often requires many attempts and external support. Nicotine replacement therapy, medications, planning around triggers, and social reinforcement dramatically increase success rates. Struggling does not make someone weak. Giving up does. Vaping, he argues, is not a harmless alternative. While it may be less dangerous than smoking in some respects, it introduces its own risks and often prolongs nicotine dependence rather than ending it. Worse, vaping has become a gateway to smoking for young people and carries unknown long-term consequences. Weed is next on the list. While occasional use may be relatively benign, chronic use is associated with addiction, impaired cognitive function, and serious risks during pregnancy. Modern cannabis is far more potent than in previous decades, and long-term use has been linked to measurable declines in memory, attention, and decision-making. Alcohol occupies a gray area. Heavy drinking, binge drinking, and drinking alone are clearly harmful. Light drinking may offer limited cardiovascular benefits for some older adults, but it also increases cancer risk. Emanuel's practical guidance is realistic rather than moralistic. If people choose to drink, they should do so moderately, socially, and never while driving. Driving itself is one of the most underestimated sources of risk. Drinking and driving, texting while driving, and distracted driving kill thousands of people every year. Even small lapses in attention dramatically increase accident risk. Avoiding these behaviors is one of the simplest ways to protect life. Sun exposure is another example of a trade-off misunderstood by popular culture. Sunlight improves mood and helps regulate circadian rhythms, but excessive exposure without protection increases skin cancer risk. Sunscreen and protective clothing reduce melanoma risk dramatically and cost little effort. Tanning beds, on the other hand, provide no health benefits and substantially increase cancer risk. They're a clear schmuck move. Vaccines receive special attention. Emanuel dismantles common myths and emphasizes that vaccines are among the most effective public health interventions in history. They prevent diseases that once crippled or killed millions. The risks of vaccines are vanishingly small compared to the risks of remaining unprotected. The underlying principle of this chapter is straightforward. Before worrying about optimization, eliminate obvious dangers. Brushing your teeth, wearing a seatbelt, avoiding addictive substances, protecting your skin, and staying vaccinated may not feel glamorous, but they save far more lives than the latest wellness trend. Wellness does not begin with perfection. It begins by not doing stupid things. Chapter 2. Talk to people. Cultivating family, friends, and social connections. If avoiding self-destruction is the foundation of wellness, relationships are its strongest pillar. Emanuel argues that social connection is one of the most powerful predictors of long-term health, yet it is routinely underestimated. Modern wellness culture focuses heavily on the body, but decades of research show that loneliness and social isolation are as damaging to health as smoking, obesity, and inactivity. Humans are inherently social creatures. From an evolutionary perspective, survival depended on belonging to a group. That wiring has not changed, even though modern life often pushes us toward isolation. Technology, remote work, suburban sprawl, and individualism have quietly eroded daily social interaction. The data are clear. People with strong social ties live longer, recover faster from illness, experience lower rates of depression, and maintain better cognitive function as they age. Marriage, close friendships, family bonds, and community involvement all correlate with reduced mortality. Emanuel stresses that it is not the number of friends that matters, but the quality of relationships. A few deep, reliable connections provide more benefit than a large network of shallow interactions. Casual online contact does not substitute for real human presence. Loneliness, by contrast, triggers chronic stress responses. It elevates cortisol levels, increases inflammation, weakens immune function, and raises the risk of heart disease and dementia. Social pain activates the same brain regions as physical pain. Importantly, relationships do not need to be perfect to be protective. Even imperfect, sometimes frustrating relationships still offer enormous health benefits. Conflict does not negate connection. Total isolation does. Emanuel also highlights the importance of intergenerational relationships. Caring for children, grandchildren, or aging parents provides meaning and structure that supports psychological health. Giving support is just as beneficial as receiving it. The practical takeaway is simple but demanding. Make time for people. Prioritize shared meals, conversations, and rituals. Build social interaction into daily routines rather than treating it as optional. Wellness is not something you do alone. It is something you live with others. Chapter 3. Expand your mind. Staying mentally sharp. Physical health without mental engagement is an incomplete form of wellness. Emanuel explains that cognitive decline is not an inevitable consequence of aging. While some slowing is natural, severe decline is strongly influenced by how actively the brain is used over a lifetime. The brain is not a static organ. It adapts, strengthens, and reorganizes itself in response to challenge. Mental stimulation builds cognitive reserve, which allows the brain to compensate for age-related changes and even disease. Education is one of the strongest predictors of cognitive longevity. People with more years of formal education show lower rates of dementia. But learning does not stop at school. Lifelong curiosity matters just as much. Activities that challenge the brain are especially protective. Reading complex material, learning new skills, playing musical instruments, speaking multiple languages, and engaging in strategic games all improve mental resilience. Passive entertainment offers limited benefit. Watching television does not challenge the brain in the same way active learning does. The goal is effortful thinking, not mere distraction. Work can serve as cognitive exercise when it involves problem-solving, decision-making, and social interaction. Retirement does not have to mean cognitive decline, but disengagement does. Emanuel also emphasizes the link between mental engagement and purpose. People who feel useful, challenged, and needed maintain better mental health and experience lower rates of depression. Importantly, mental health is deeply connected to social connection. Conversation itself is a powerful cognitive activity. Talking to people exercises memory, language, emotional regulation, and perspective-taking. The message of this chapter is encouraging. Protecting your brain does not require puzzles or apps. It requires curiosity, effort, and engagement with the world. Chapter 4. Eat your ice cream. Consuming healthy food and drink. This chapter delivers the book's most misunderstood message. Emanuel does not argue for indulgence without limits. Instead, he rejects the idea that health requires constant dietary restriction, guilt, and obsession. Nutrition advice has become overly complex and often contradictory. People are told to fear carbohydrates, fats, sugar, meat, dairy, or all of the above. The result is confusion and anxiety rather than better health. The evidence supports a simpler approach. Diets that promote longevity share common features. They're rich in fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, and healthy fats, low in processed foods and added sugars, and moderate in portion size. Extreme diets rarely outperform balanced ones over the long term. Sustainability matters more than short-term optimization. A diet you can maintain for decades is healthier than a perfect diet you abandon after a month. Emanuel criticizes the wellness obsession with supplements and superfoods. For most people, supplements offer little benefit beyond what a balanced diet provides. They also divert attention from behaviors that matter more. The title metaphor matters. Eating well does not require eliminating pleasure. Occasional indulgences do not negate an otherwise healthy diet. Enjoyment supports adherence and mental well-being. Guilt-driven eating patterns increase stress and reduce quality of life without improving outcomes. Wellness should not feel like punishment. Alcohol, as discussed earlier, should be moderate and social if consumed at all. Sugary drinks and highly processed foods are far more damaging than occasional desserts. The core principle is moderation without obsession. Eat mostly real food. Share meals with others. Enjoy treats without shame. Chapter 5. Move it. Exercising well and regularly. Movement is medicine, but it does not need to be extreme. Emanuel emphasizes that regular physical activity reduces the risk of heart disease, diabetes, cancer, depression, and cognitive decline. It also improves mood, sleep, and functional independence. The biggest barrier to exercise is not knowledge, but inertia. People overestimate how much exercise they need and underestimate how effective modest activity can be. Walking, gardening, household chores, and active commuting all count. Structured exercise is helpful, but movement integrated into daily life is more sustainable. Consistency matters more than intensity. Moderate exercise performed regularly provides greater benefit than sporadic intense workouts. Strength training is especially important as people age. Muscle mass protects against falls, frailty, and metabolic disease. Balance and flexibility reduce injury risk. Exercise also supports mental health. It reduces anxiety, improves mood, and enhances cognitive function. Social exercise compounds these benefits. The goal is not athletic performance. It is maintaining the ability to move, function, and engage with life. Chapter 6. Sleep like a baby. Getting the rest you need. Sleep is not optional. It is foundational. Emanuel explains that chronic sleep deprivation impairs immune function, increases cardiovascular risk, worsens mental health, and accelerates cognitive decline. Sleep supports memory consolidation, emotional regulation, and metabolic balance. It is when the brain repairs itself. Modern life undermines sleep through artificial light, screen exposure, irregular schedules, and cultural glorification of busyness. The solution is behavioral rather than pharmaceutical. Consistent sleep schedules, reduce screen time before bed, morning sunlight exposure, and a quiet, dark sleeping environment matter more than sleep aids. Sleep debt accumulates. You cannot fully compensate for chronic deprivation with occasional long nights. Prioritizing sleep improves nearly every other aspect of wellness. The book closes with a reminder that wellness is not the ultimate goal. It is a means. Living longer only matters if those years are filled with meaning, connection, and contribution. Values outlast biology. Emanuel encourages readers to be decent, caring, engaged members of their communities. Kindness, generosity, and purpose enrich life in ways no supplement ever could. Wellness should fade into the background of a life well lived. Not an obsession, not a competition, just a foundation that supports everything else. The message is clear. Follow the 6 rules most of the time. Live fully. Eat your ice cream. And don't be a schmuck.